What's up, everybody? Welcome on into the slate. Thank you for being with us here on, what day is it? This Tuesday. I'm not usually here on Tuesdays. Adam Kaufman, Gary and Thorne, Matt LaMarca. How are you guys?
Doing good.
What's
Great.
most exciting to you right now? Is I know for both of you, it's not like the run up to the Final Four. That's we need a different group of panelists for that. So is it the wind down of the NBA before the playoffs? Is it the ramp up to opening day in Major League Baseball? Can you just not wait to talk about the quarterbacks some more in the NFL? What's getting you going here, LaMarca?
I would say probably today the NBA has been forefront on my mind. I'm most excited for the start of baseball season, but the thing I've been thinking about today is just, some of the award stuff. I find the Emmanuel Quickly Sixth Man of the Year debate to be fascinating. Obviously we have a ton of playoff stuff going on in the Western Conference with teams moving up and down. You could be out of the play-in tournament one day and in the actual guaranteed playoff spot just a few days later. So the NBA is doing plenty to keep me entertained until baseball gets here on Thursday.
Well, you mentioned Emmanuel Quickly. Let's talk a little awards, and we can bring up the DraftKings Sportsbook as well. Show the people.
Oh, so it doesn't matter what I'm excited about?
No, wow. I want to know what you're excited about, but I want to continue at least with the flow of the conversation. Then you can potentially take us in a totally different direction.
Okay.
What if you're excited about tonight's hockey slate? Well, we're not talking about that right now. That doesn't do it for us. So, LaMarca, talk to me about Emmanuel Quickly a little bit here. I'll bring up the sixth man odds. The people are looking at it. Minus 210, the favorite. Malcolm Brogdon is behind him at plus 150. And then you kind of have the field, if you will. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Quickly, I think, is going to win this award. I would not be taking him at these odds. But I think last night's game, I mean, an absolute masterclass. Granted, it was against the Rockets, so, relatively low degree of difficulty. But
still counts.
40 points on 14 of 18 shooting with 9 assists. That'll play for sure. But this has kind of been the MO with Quickly all year. When he is starting and playing in place of Jalen Brunson, he's arguably their second best player. I would say Julius Randle's still their best player. And as a starter this year in 17 starts, he's averaging 21, 5, and 5, basically. But when he comes off the bench, which is technically what the sixth man award is about, he's averaging 12 points, just under 4 assists, and just under 4 rebounds and just under 3 assists. Like, that's pretty mediocre production for a guy that is a minus 210 favorite to win what is essentially the Reserve of the Year award, right? So there are a couple of different ways you can look at it. You can say that when he has been asked to take on a larger role, he's come through for the team, but I don't know. I just think it's a weird year. Like, if you asked me, was Emmanuel Quickly the best guy that came off the bench this season? I would say no, but he probably does have the best numbers if you just look at them all like in without breaking it down, right?
My favorite, Gary, and maybe this was just happening in my Twitter circles among people that I follow, but there was an argument as to how the sixth man is even defined. Like, literally, like how is this person categorized when it comes to the voters and who's eligible? And I mean, while I didn't look it up, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is simply, it simply comes down to, did you come off the bench more than you started? Therefore, you are eligible for sixth man of the year. So let's not overcomplicate it, obviously. What's your view of this race?
I do just think it's interesting that I would say 2 or 3 years ago, this would have been one of the simpler NBA awards to determine. I mean, I always start every NBA season with my diatribe about how stupid most improved player is in the NBA, where it's now basically turned into which top 3 lottery selection from 2 years ago is taking a massive jump from his sophomore season into his third season, which is what those players are supposed to be doing anyway. Like, Ja Morant winning the most improved player award is still just such a ridiculous thing to wrap my head around. So it's somewhat discouraging that we're now sort of finding this gray area with sixth man as well. Although, as you said, Koff, technically speaking, there are parameters set out for this, and Quickly definitely falls into those parameters. It doesn't explicitly say that you can't use his, statistical profile from when he happens to start games. And I just think this is going to be an issue we face more and more often. I think Matt had sort of said this is a very weird year for determining the best guy coming off a bench or the best sixth man. And I would agree with that. And I think one of the major reasons here is there's just more lineup turnover than ever before. Starters are starting fewer games than they ever have. We've got more guys resting on any given nights. Like, if you're a really good, quote unquote, sixth man in the current version of the NBA, you're probably going to start 25 to 30 games because that's just what the NBA is at this point. So I do think I think we have to start changing our parameters of what this award is exactly. And again, it's also still just an award that's voted on by the media. And generally speaking, the guy who's flashy, the guy who's new, the guy who's stealing headlines is going to be the one who gravitates some of that vote share. And when your biggest competition is Malcolm Brogdon, and I love Malcolm Brogdon, I think he's been a fantastic NBA player since he came into the league as a second-round pick, but he's doing exactly what he's done for the entirety of his career. Nothing about what Malcolm Brogdon has done for the Celtics this year is surprising or shocking or even overly noteworthy. He's just Malcolm Brogdon.
And he's doing exactly what they required him to do.
Exactly. So I just think, again, the sexiness factor is always going to kind of play a part in these discussions, particularly in the NBA, which is maybe the most discussed sport we have when it comes to the Flash. So I'm not overly shocked that a guy in a major market who just put up 40 points and who has been doing this when he's been given an opportunity to start has suddenly taken the lead in this race, even though his numbers when he comes off the bench are technically worse than Brogdon's.
That would be fun if that was, a caveat to the rule of defining sixth man, is that you could only vote for a guy based on his statistical profile when he comes off the bench.
It's just
you have to
hard.
completely throw out his starting numbers. They don't count. You have to go to Basketball Reference, look at his splits, and make your decision from there.
Well, again, I might be wrong about this, but writers don't submit their MVP ballot at the last day of the season. It's a couple weeks into the playoffs, isn't it?
I believe it's. I could be wrong. I think it's the reverse. I believe it's right when the regular season ends. I don't think you can vote once the playoffs start.
Maybe it's baseball then. There's one sport where literally it's like you don't submit your vote until the playoffs are mostly over, and it's like, but don't count the playoffs. Don't do it. We're trusting you guys. Don't do it.
Like, Eamon, okay, our producer, cool. I don't know if you want to effort an answer to that just so we have complete clarity, please and thank you. But I believe that is the case. While we're talking races, though, the MVP race continues to be interesting. Obviously, in the couple of weeks that we have remaining in the regular season, I'm fascinated by it, to be perfectly honest. Sorry, Tatum, sorry, Luka, you're not in the club. It's a three-man race right now. As we know, it's Nikola Jokic, it's Joel Embiid, it's Giannis Antetokounmpo. Everybody got very excited for what was going to be a matchup of MVP candidates, finalists last night. And I like that Embiid has dropped to second in the race after ducking Jokic in the matchup, and the Sixers just up and resting, all their key guys for a primetime TV matchup like a bunch of cowards. Joker is sitting here pretty at the favorite, plus 105, Embiid plus 115, Giannis at plus 475. I've said this so many times, LaMarca, over the course of this season. I won't do the diatribe again. I'll say it very quickly. I can't envision Jokic winning, not because he's not deserving, not because he's not elite, not because he's blah, 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 blah. I just think that voter fatigue is a real thing. And for him to three-peat this award would shock me.
So I'll push back a little bit, because I think that specifically when it comes to NBA voting, all of the writers are now very well educated. Everything is done publicly. And if you make a bad pick, you get shamed. So
I remember Gary Washburn picking Carmelo Anthony for MVP a couple of years back.
And literally being the only person who didn't vote for LeBron, I believe it was.
Shunned.
And he got taken to
task.
Yeah. So there are going to be a lot of really smart people who really dive into this stuff. And I'm always going to be pro Jokic. If you look at any of the advanced statistics, for the most part, he's going to come out on top. He has his team in first place in his conference. Joel Embiid's in third place in the East. The East probably a little bit tougher than the West this year, but last year, if they had given it to Embiid over Jokic, I think it would have been a big mistake. This year, if it goes to Embiid over Jokic, it's more justifiable in my opinion. The gap between the two is a little bit closer. Embiid does have an edge in some of the statistical categories, like just the pure counting stats. I agree. I'm very disappointed we didn't get to see those guys square off last night. I'm sure that Joel Embiid really did not want to sit out. He might have really been hurt, or if he wasn't, I'm sure he fought like hell to try and get on the floor, because if there's one thing we know about Joel Embiid, it's he cares about this kind of stuff. So I still think, again, all I can do is tell you what I would do if I was a voter, and I would be voting for Jokic. And I do think that the writers now are looking at this stuff a lot more analytically and are just inclined to give it to who they think is the best player, regardless of whether or not he's won 2 MVPs or vote fatigue, etc.
Gary, and you're as analytical as they come. So you tell me, what's your read?
I mean, I feel pretty similar. I don't know why I always try to say that word. I feel similar to how Matt feels. I think if you're just asking me who would be my vote, it's Nikola Jokic. I think it is going to be interesting to see how the 76ers sort of handle this down the stretch of the season. Embiid and Harden, for that matter, are questionable for tomorrow's game. They're not locked into the 3 spot, but I think they've got a 2-game cushion on the Cavs. They're far enough back from the Celtics and the Bucks at this point where I don't think they're moving up. So, obviously this isn't a situation where they can just rest their players and kind of just coast into the 3rd seed. But at the same time, this might even become a matchup based thing where if it becomes clear that Milwaukee or Boston is going to be that number 1 seed, maybe the 76ers would rather play one of those 2 teams and would rather slide into the 4 if that became a particular situation that presented itself. So I think a lot of this is sort of in the hands of the 76ers at this point, and whether or not they let Joel Embiid play in enough games to win this award. Because to Matt's point, and to a point I've been making for the last couple of weeks, the reason to kind of get behind Embiid when you could have had him at plus money was just he wants to win this award. Like, I don't think Nikola Jokic cares all that much at this point. And that's not to say his heart's not in it or anything like that. But I think honestly for him this season, it's like the Nuggets have to make an impact in the playoffs. He has to play well in the playoffs, particularly now that they're going to have home court advantage in the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. The same could be said for the Sixers, who have disappointed time and time again in the Eastern Conference playoffs. But Embiid has shown just the last 2-3 years, he desperately wants this award. So I think if he has any say in the matter, he's going to be playing in these games. And if he does, I think with the statistical profile he'd been putting up the last 6 weeks, I think he's got a really, really good shot. Because again, it's got to be that he wins this award down the stretch. Because if you do look analytically, it's still pretty clearly Jokic with the advantage.
Let's talk about tonight's slate a little bit. We can get into some DFS. We'll start obviously where we are, DraftKings Sportsbook, and look at the betting angles. You've got a smaller slate tonight, just a handful of games. As far as the key injury news, Jimmy Butler recently ruled out. He's not going to play. Jared Allen's questionable. Gordon Hayward doubtful, which with him may as well say out. Draymond Green probable. Jordan Poole, same story. Kyle Lowry plans to play. Grant Williams questionable. Gary Trent is questionable as well, as is Isaac Okoro. So those are some of the quote-unquote bigger names for this evening, which means for the most part, stars, those that are available anyway, are going to play. And we've got some, at least a few bigger spreads, I would say. The Celtics heavily favored in Washington. The Memphis fairly comfortable 7-point favorites at home. Thunder at home by 9. The Warriors 8.5 at home against the Pelicans. So LaMarca, do you have your best bets, your favorite picks tonight?
Yeah, I'm taking the Charlotte Hornets plus 9 points. The Hornets in rough shape, right? Their lineup is not in a good place right now. They're sitting basically everybody. They're clearly tanking, but it hasn't necessarily had a huge impact for them in terms of wins and losses on the court. They've won 3 of their last 4, including sweeping the Mavericks in a home and home, which is just embarrassingly bad for Dallas. But now you've got they're getting 9 points against an OKC team without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I like OKC. I am very like, I don't know, proud. Proud's probably not the right word, but they've had a great season, right? They were expected to be in contention for the #1 overall pick, and they could end up in the play-in tournament. That's a huge win for this organization. And they've got a lot of really good young players. But without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I don't think they deserve to be favored by nearly double-digit points against anyone. So I will plug my nose and I will take the Charlotte Hornets +9 here.
Chet's not even available for them yet either. Goes to show what the future may look like for OKC. What about you, Garion? Where are you looking?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to that game and talk about the under 227. I think that would even be high if we were just dealing with these two teams in a vacuum. But you've got a Hornets team that has not been able to score consistently for a very long time. I mean, they went up against a Dallas defense that is possibly the worst in basketball, and they won those games, but it was because of their defense, not because of their offense. Across the last 10 games, these two teams rank 27th and 28th in the league in offensive rating. And a big part of that for the Thunder is you're not getting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in all 10 of those games. And they really struggle offensively when he is not on the court. They also have been paced down slightly as of late. They were a team that was averaging almost 103 possessions per 48 minutes for most of the season. Across that same 10-game sample, they're down to about 100 possessions per 48 minutes. And I think you can also correlate some of that to SGA not being on the court and sort of just running that transition offense. I struggle to see who's going to score here, particularly if Kelly Oubre Jr. is not available. He's got to play through a questionable tag tonight. Gordon Hayward's doubtful, so he's probably not going to play in this one. One of these two teams isn't scoring 100 points. Let's just put it that way. So it's going to be really hard for them to get to 227 as a total.
Anything else you'd like to add on the sportsbook side before we go to NBA DFS? Either of you? Great.
I'd probably take the Celtics too, if I'm being honest. The Wizards are terrible.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was keeping my bias out of this, but Celtics -11 and the over are two places that I very much like in that game tonight. To your point, Grant Williams, if he was going to play much at all, is not going to be a guy who alters what that game is going to look like. And there's no Beal, there's no Kuzma. The couple other guys are going to be missing for Washington.
Monte Morris is back though.
Yeah, it's
not that's going to change your projections all that much.
Yeah, that game could be could be a solid 25-point game going into the fourth quarter. We'll see. As far as DFS goes, well, the Celtics, Jason Tatum is probably like the one, and he's the highest priced guy at 10-4. He's probably the stud who is maybe least appealing when it comes to building around tonight, because there's Curry in a great spot. Porzingis on the other side of that Boston game is in a good spot, obviously. Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, Brandon Ingram, Jaren Jackson Jr. Bam is in a phenomenal spot for Miami. Evan Mobley, really good spot. So all these guys that are, kind of that 8K and up, basically, and Bam is 7,500. But most guys that are 8K and up, with the exception of basically the Celtics, Tatum and Brown, are guys that you could be comfortable building around LaMarca.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of really any of the studs on today's slate.
Okay.
The guy that really stands out the most to me for his price tag, as far as like expensive players, is going to be Donovan Mitchell at 8,600. The Hawks have just been a fantasy goldmine since the All-Star break. They're 4th in pace and 26th in defensive efficiency. The Cavaliers are playing in a game with a 239-point total. That's like impossible for them. That's how slow they are on a night-to-night basis. But tonight, they're going to be supercharged offensively. So all their guys, for the most part, have been priced down because they haven't been great recently, him and Darius Garland. I think both guys have the potential to go off in this spot.
Garion?
Yeah, you're going to end up putting a couple guys who are above 9K into lineups. That's obviously going to happen. And I do like Garland a lot, who's slightly under 9K, but my eye's really drawn to sort of that like 6 to 7K tier. I think there's a lot of nice value in there tonight. You mentioned Tyler Hero, who I just think is going to have a massive usage tonight with no Jimmy Butler. Kyle Lowry's still playing on a minutes restriction. So just, it's really a lot of Tyler Hero. That is the offensive game plan for the Heat in this contest. I also think as much as we were just piling on the Wizards, they do still have some capable players, and a guy who's stepped up and has really shown himself to be a very nice contributor and someone who can almost play a pseudo point forward is Denny Avdia. He's been basically getting over 35 DraftKings points per game without Kyle Kuzma, without Bradley Beal. He went over 40 DraftKings points in a couple contests the past week. Just someone who brings just 3 category upside. I mean, he's going to score some points. He's not the best like bucket getter in the world, but he'll get you 15 to 20 points. More importantly, he's an elite rebounder for his position, and he's an elite assist guy for his position. So until he's priced over $7,500, I would just keep going back to Avdia unless Kuzma or Beal walk back onto the court, which honestly might not be that likely with just 2 weeks left in the season.
There really are a lot of great value plays or mid-tier plays. Like, I mean, you can get into some of the more obvious value, like Lamar Stevens, if you wanted to play him for Cleveland, or Aaron Wiggins for the Thunder. Lamarca was talking about them. But the mid-tier guys, whether it's Oubre, as Garion mentioned, Tyus Jones, tremendous spot, Nick Richards for Charlotte, a couple of those Thunder guys, really. Isaiah
that's
Joe.
The other thing is, like, if Oubre doesn't play in this game, suddenly anyone on Charlotte is viable.
Yeah,
like, especially
I think,
Oubre, but yeah.
Well, I don't even think we talked about Desmond Bane either. That's another guy who's obviously positioned well to do well tonight. We've got about, 15 minutes or so left in the show. We'll bounce around a little bit. Let's go to baseball because opening day is just a couple of days away, guys. I'm going to be over at Fenway. Looking forward to that. Want to see these Red Sox start 1-0. But we'll see. Corey Kluber will be on the mound. That'll be fun. But not obviously the game that is going to be most compelling to you guys. And we don't even need to get game specific a couple days out. For you guys, when it comes to futures, looking at whether it's to win the World Series or whether it's, maybe you're just looking at make-miss playoffs or win totals or player awards. You could go any number of different directions on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Lamarck, I'll start with you. What are some of the things that are catching your eye in terms of Major League Baseball betting?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about futures a few times. I love the Miami Marlins over this year. I think by the end of the season, we could be talking about them as a team with like one of the best young pitching staffs in baseball. I'm in on the Angels team over win total. Eventually, they're going to figure some things out. If they just stay healthy, they have 2 of the 3 best players in baseball. So. And they only need to go 500 to hit the over on their win total. I think that makes a ton of sense. And I also have a bet, like a longer shot bet on the Dodgers to miss the playoffs. Yeah, I'm not. This Dodgers team is sketchier than usual. I mean, they're still a very good baseball team. Don't get me wrong, but you've got to contend with the Padres in your own division, who figure to be really good this year. And then the NL East could get 3 teams into the playoffs. So now we're talking about, the path to a wild card isn't all that easy. So I think you can get that. There's a pretty good price tag available, plus 475 to miss the playoffs. I think it was even higher when I took it, but this is not the same Dodger team, losing Trey Turner, losing Gavin Lux to injury. They don't have the same pitching depth that they had last year. So I'm not expecting another 100-win Dodger season.
Garion?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of futures. I'd recommend. I tweeted out recently all the stuff I've written for DK Nation the last 6 weeks. There's a lot of future bets in there if anyone wants to go check them all out. But yeah, I think building off of what Matt was just talking about, I just wanted to check the odds to see if they'd moved, because I was thinking maybe you could get a better line on this than they had 5-6 weeks ago. It's still at plus 100 for the Yankees, but there's head-to-head wins props this season on the DraftKings Sportsbook, and Yankees versus Dodgers. I know the Yankees have had the spring training from hell when it comes to injury woes. I mean, the big reason I like the Yankees and was projecting them to maybe even break 100 wins this season was just the depth and the star power in that rotation. And suddenly Luis Severino is maybe going to miss 3 or 4 starts. It does seem like Carlos Rodon is trending in a really positive direction, but still probably not going to see him until late April at the earliest. However, you've also got breakouts like Anthony Volpe suddenly solving that shortstop issue in the hole in their infield that we thought they might have 5 weeks ago. So I still think at plus 100, for a lot of the same reasons that Matt just laid out, I would take the Yankees over the Dodgers every day of the week. I just think that this Dodgers team, it's good. I mean, you look at the top 4 or 5 guys in that lineup and it still makes you afraid, but the rotation, the depth it's just not the same. And I know the Dodgers are sort of like the Rays in the sense where it doesn't really do you any good to look at a depth chart of their bullpen arms because they just have a system and it works and they develop guys and they're good and it doesn't matter. But with the injuries they have in that bullpen right now, and I know some of those guys might be back again in April, early May, I would say the average fan might know 2 Dodger relievers right now. Like it's just not the same level of team that they've had in the past. So I'd be looking into a lot of ways to possibly bet against the Dodgers. I think at almost plus 500 to miss the playoffs, it's a really nice bet that Matt laid out. Another one I've talked about on here before, but still feel pretty strongly about, and this line hasn't moved. I thought it might because he was getting some helium in redraft formats, and sometimes that does change these odds a little bit. Christian Javier is still 35-1 to lead the league in strikeouts. A big part of that is just he's never thrown 190, 200 innings. He's never been asked to. And I think that's kind of an important distinction here. Javier is not someone who has been injury prone throughout his career. He's not someone who you just know is going to get shut down and have his innings capped. It's just that last season, the Astros were so blessed in their rotation, they didn't need someone like Javier starting full time until mid-May. And once he took over the reins and was a mainstay in that rotation, he started 25 games. He was absolutely phenomenal. He had the 3rd highest qualified strikeout rate in baseball last season, tied with Shohei Ohtani. Like that's the level of strikeout artist we are talking about when it comes to Christian Javier. And again, pitching for another pitcher factory in the Houston Astros organization. I just think with what they're having to deal with right now, the fact that they lose Justin Verlander, the fact that Lance McCullers Jr. is not going to be ready to start the season in their rotation, he's going to start 32 games. So I think Javier 35-1, that number is way too long.
I got a league leader bet as well. It's not as juicy on the odds, but I like Corbin Carroll to lead the league in steals at 15-1. I mean, he's the fastest player in the league. If you look at all the data, the running metrics from last year, he had the fastest home to first to third, StatCast max top speed, whatever. Like he's just the fastest guy in the league. And he can hit a little bit, right? I mean, he's the top prospect in baseball for a reason. So he signed an extension. He's going to be on the opening day roster, probably hitting near the top of the lineup. And like for some reason, he hasn't gotten the same steam as a guy like Anthony Volpe, right? Who is another big time stolen base threat, but the Yankees have already said he's going to bat 9th to start the year, right? There's a big difference between a guy like Carroll who could be hitting in the top 3 and a guy like Volpe who's going to be hitting 9th for at least the first, few weeks of the season, I would imagine. So to me, Carroll should be one of the favorites to win this award. So I'm happy to grab him at 15-1.
Do you guys have any bold bets? And what I mean by that, obviously, like the Dodgers to miss the playoffs, that's a pretty bold bet in the eyes of many. But if you were to look at, I don't know, something that could just really surprise people this year, something that Gary and you could, just obviously get ahead on, you're taking a flyer. Hopefully you're not just throwing money away, but man, you look good if it pays off.
I mean, again, we just gave you Dodgers to miss the playoffs and a 35-1 guy.
And the Angels to make the playoffs. You don't get any bolder than that.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got some other like longer shot sort of player futures you could possibly look into. Like I think I've talked on this show before about Carlos Correa for American League MVP. It's 35-1 right now. I, in general, am just on the Twins this season. I believe their win total is shot up to like 83.5 or something along those lines. It started at 81.5. And that's when I got on the over. It was way off in terms of what some of the projection systems had spat out at that point. I know Pacoda had them as like an 88 win team winning the NL Central. And they're also, at the time I bet it may have changed at this point. They were plus 145 to make the playoffs, which seemed a little crazy. Again, it's all narrative based, right? And as Matt said, the writers who vote on this stuff are just more educated than they've ever been. Although baseball still might be lagging in that sense a little bit. Some guys not maybe necessarily willing to buy into some of the new age statistics, but Correa's awesome. Like, he's one of the best players in the American League. If you look at his WAR last season, he was still a top 5 guy. Or at least when you look at the last 2 seasons, and combine them, like a top 5 player in baseball by Fangraphs WAR. He has the ability to hang with the best players in the league. I think so much of this 35-1 number is we're all just worried, like, when's the ankle going to snap off? And it's like, the Mets didn't not sign this guy. The Giants didn't not sign this guy because they thought his ankle was going to break in 2023. They were worried about his ankle in like 2026. So I think we're putting like 4 years worth of worry all into this season. Like, he's going to be fine. And if he gets 600 plate appearances, I think the opportunity he has to like change this narrative of a guy who was like broken goods, who ended up on the Twins because these other 2 organizations that we perceive as better organizations didn't want him. They were worried about him. If he comes out and just has a normal Carlos Correa season where he finishes with like a 7 WAR, I don't know. I think he's got a really good opportunity, at least better than what the perceived odds of a 35-1 ranking would tell you at this point. I just think Correa is a guy we're going to talk about, and that's half the battle when it comes to MVP.
Marca, anything to add?
That's a good number on Correa for sure. I would say the Dodgers is probably my biggest bold take. The one thing I'll say is that I like the Rays to win the AL East at plus 340. The Rays have entered like Spurs, Pittsburgh Steelers territory for me, where I just expect them to be good every year. And the Yankees were great last year, but Aaron Judge turned in arguably the greatest hitting season that I've ever seen. I mean, definitely the best since Bonds. So can they survive if he's not that good? What if he just hits 45 homers this year? So I think they regress a little bit. Toronto, Gary, and you know how it is up in Toronto. You can look great on paper, but they're gonna find ways to lose games. They just always do. The Rays are the opposite. They are just the model of consistency, and it should shock no one when they win 95 games and back themselves into the playoffs once again this year.
Well, we've got a few minutes left before everyone flocks to Twitter to check out pictures of Glash grilling chicken. Were either of you on the show yesterday, by the way, with the aforementioned Brendan Glasheen? Nods or shaking heads? You were not. So good. You haven't had a chance to weigh in on Lamar Jackson formally requesting a trade from Baltimore, which evidently happened like 3 weeks ago, and because he doesn't have an agent, nobody talked about it. So good for us, I guess, to get to explore where this goes. We've spoken about this guy. We've chatted about his future to death in terms of will anyone sign him and be willing to give up the 2 picks, and will he actually leave Baltimore, and yada yada. But I don't know. Once it feels like it becomes a little more real, Garion, when you actually formally request a trade. Do we think that he is going to leave? And if so, where is he going?
I don't know, man. Like, I guess the
so
noise we heard
by Lamar and QB talk in general.
I'd rather talk about why I think Mike Trout's going to hit 37.5 home runs this season. But Lamar,
I'll give you 1,000 to 1 on 37.5.
For what? Lamar Jackson home runs?
No, Mike Trout home runs. He hits 37.5 home runs. You get 1,000 to 1.
Okay, wow. We got to talk about that.
We got video.
You're not getting the joke.
No, I know. I'm trying to think, like, if he gets 37 home runs and 1 ground rule doubles, does that count? But probably not. Look, Lamar, like, we've heard the rumblings now, like the Patriots are involved.
Maybe. I mean, like Meek Mill says so.
Well, again, like, what are we hearing? What's the rumblings? Like, the Colts had a couple days where there were rumblings. The Patriots are seemingly that team in the cycle right now. I don't know, man. Like, there's only so many times I can say he's a very good quarterback and he would be an improvement on a lot of these teams. Like, here, if the Patriots trade for Lamar Jackson, will it be a great move in 3 years? I don't know. It might not be. Will their odds be better to win the AFC today if that trade happens? Yes, substantially, because Mac Jones stinks and Bailey Zappi's not good either. So, like, if you need a quarterback, you should probably trade for Lamar Jackson.
I think we're heading for a holdout. I don't think Lamar Jackson ever plays for the Ravens again. I think there's too much bad blood at this point. I don't think that they can rectify the situation. But at the same time, for whatever reason, we've seen that the NFL owners just do not want to get involved with this guy. I mean, the Falcons went out of their way to name Desmond Ridder their starting quarterback in March. But Lamar Jackson is available. What are we doing here? So I think the most likely scenario is he sits out, he holds out a year, and then we get to do it all again.
Can't wait. Can't wait. All right, it's time to go, but this show will return for the next 3 days because, again, it's only Tuesday. The Sweat comes your way, 11 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. This show right around 5:15. It's called The Slate. Hopefully you know that already. He is Lamarca, the other guy, Gary, and you can't see either of them. I'm Kaufman. Thanks to Cody. Thanks to Eamon. Thanks to you for watching. Anyone hungry? That's what Glash would say if he were.